Hello, everyone. I love the question that prompted this session. OneDrive, isn't that the same? Isn't that just SharePoint? We get that question a lot, and as well as many other questions of how and why to use OneDrive versus SharePoint. And so the idea today is to help create some awareness and help bring some clarity to why OneDrive really should be part of your work from home strategy, or just any strategy if you're planning on using Microsoft 365 and SharePoint to its fullest extent. And today we're going to talk about how OneDrive and SharePoint work together, but we're going to dig into the details of OneDrive and some of the reasons that you might want to set it up and how you might even encourage and or train your team specifically. And in some instances, I might even encourage you to actually do it and make the clicks for your team for those folks that might need a little extra help. And if you think about it, I imagine you know who those folks are. All right. So let's dig in. Today, we are going to cover OneDrive versus SharePoint and focusing primarily on OneDrive, but you can't really talk about OneDrive without talking about SharePoint, so we will engage that as well. The purpose of this session is how OneDrive fits into work from home. I also like to talk about cloud storage because it is cloud storage, and sometimes that confuses folks. And there are some personal and professional reasons to use it, obviously relative to SharePoint and working with your organization and work from home. But some of these same concepts also apply to you individually if you're thinking about storing documents on your local laptop or desktop, or your personal laptop or desktop, for example. We are going to talk about some of the common uses and even some of the challenges that you might have to think through relative to using OneDrive, because there are some of them. In fact, I just learned of a new one this last week in a use case that one of our clients brought to our attention, and OneDrive isn't going to solve the problem that they thought it would. So I'm going to bring that up and talk about maybe a workaround of some examples of where some challenges that OneDrive has. We're going to go into the demonstration and illustrate all of these details we're going to talk about, and then of course wrap it up with some Q&A and recommended next steps. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm Nate Austin. I'll be presenting today, and Stephanie Kingsley will be behind the scenes producing. Before we move on, if you have any questions, the question panel is open. We're going to go through about 30 minutes of content before we open it up for questions. This is recorded, and we will send out a recording link after the session is complete, and it'll also be available on our website. So I definitely look forward to hearing from you there, or having you share that if you feel this content is valuable. So before we move on, just 1 minute about MyTech. MyTech, we are a small and medium business technology and business consulting organization. One of the things that we've learned is over the last 20 years, we've found a proven IT strategy. Doesn't mean it's the only proven IT strategy. It just means it's a proven IT strategy that we know works and delivers consistent and reliable results for our clients. And that's ultimately why they hire us, is because they want consistent, reliable, proven results. We know that we can't remove every challenge. We know that we can't remove, every business challenge, and we try and remove as many IT challenges as possible. But our goal ultimately is, and we found this throughout the pandemic, that our clients gave us feedback, is that IT was one less challenge that they had to work through during the pandemic. IT just worked. So everything else that they had to focus on and change and transition was one of the key areas they were able to focus on and spend more time, as well as serving their clients or customers better. So together, when we work with our clients, our goal, and we shoot to achieve this and strive to achieve this, is that our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. If that's something you'd like to talk about more, we'd love to hear from you. Please raise your hand, throw us a comment afterwards, or shoot us an email. But that's not why you're here today. So let's dig into, first of all, talking about what is OneDrive. That's one of the challenges I figured. In order to make sure that we properly frame this conversation, we really should talk about, well, what is OneDrive? How can I think about OneDrive as it relates to the other Microsoft 365 tools? And how it might compare to other tools that I might already be familiar with. So for instance, where most of us are used to a couple scenarios that you may have experienced, depending how long you've been in the workforce. For some of you, myself included, I feel this is aging me a little bit. But when you had My Documents on your desktop, there was a My Documents folder. Well, one of the things that IT folks used to do is we used to redirect that My Documents folder to the server, and so it would basically get saved and backed up. And more currently, what we've seen is if you have like network file shares, there's usually a user drive. Sometimes that's the U drive. It might be a different letter. It doesn't matter, but it's the user drive. It's where you can, as an individual, store your information. Well, effectively, that same technology they've been using, whether it's the My Documents folder, going back a little bit, or the user drive, if you will, effectively think about OneDrive as filling that gap. Or that's one thing that OneDrive does. It does multiple things, but that's one of the flavors of OneDrive, is that it really solves that My Documents or your user drive function. So if you think about that and how you've used that in the past, that's one of the concepts that I'd like you to realize OneDrive is basically the future of that problem, or how to solve that problem. So effectively, OneDrive then, it's a tool that synchronizes files to and from the cloud. Okay, so it's to and from, because you might move files to your OneDrive and it syncs to the cloud, or you might go to the cloud like your SharePoint site, and we'll illustrate this later, and download files from the cloud and sync to the cloud. So that's one of the things that, and so the other file, I didn't want to list it on the slide, but just to call it out, some of the other technologies that you've probably heard of that are very similar. There are some key differences, like Dropbox or Box. Either one of those two solutions are similar. So if you've used Dropbox in the past or Box, the functionality we're talking about today, as far as syncing data to and from the cloud, it's basically the same. There are some nuances how OneDrive integrates with your Microsoft platform differently than the way Box and Dropbox, which is why I would recommend using OneDrive versus one of those tools. But if you've done those and used those before, that's another way to kind of wrap your mind around what does OneDrive really accomplish and what does it do. So OneDrive, so how do you access it? Well, one of the ways, there's 3 different ways, via the File Explorer. So the little folder icon that you may click on, and how you might navigate the way you used to navigate your network drives, or the way you still navigate your network drives, or your local C drive, for example. Well, OneDrive just fits right in there. So that's one of the ways in which you can do it, is right in your File Explorer. So we'll show you that too. Your web browser, it's another way to access OneDrive, as well as your mobile app. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the mobile app today as far as how to access it, but if you haven't downloaded the OneDrive mobile app, I'd highly recommend it. We are going to touch on some ways in which the mobile app can solve some common problems that we've found across lots of different clients and lots of different industries, as far as how the mobile OneDrive app can really work well for you. And then there's 3 types. Again, this is where I like to throw up a public service announcement and thank Microsoft for basically calling something that has 3 different types the same thing, and it is confusing. I'm just going to be straight and direct and open and honest with you about that. But I'm going to show you how to recognize the 3 different types, and as a business, by policy or by practice, you can actually prevent one of the types, the personal version, for example. There's some work that we can do on that. But basically, there's a personal, there's a company, and then there's one that syncs with SharePoint. All of those are called OneDrive, and we're going to show you how to recognize those differences as we go through it. So that's a high-level summary of what is OneDrive. So now that we've wrapped our heads around that, basically it's a replacement for your My Documents or the user drive. It's also a file syncing tool, and you can have some company syncing as well as SharePoint syncing. Well, let's dig in about some of the common problems and some of the common challenges that uses and challenges that OneDrive can help solve. So first of all, one of the things I like to mention is if your files are now in SharePoint. Most people, if you've been operating, again, depending on how long you've been in the workforce, and if your organization is just now starting to use SharePoint, it's a fundamentally different way to access information. So OneDrive is a way to help bridge the gap between the way you were using and accessing files to the way your organization is moving to SharePoint. OneDrive can help actually bridge that gap and give you access to SharePoint in a way that you're used to accessing it when you had file servers. So we're going to show these things, but this one of the common problems that I found is that, well, it can help people on your team adopt and adapt to the new technology. So if you're trying to roll this out and drive adoption across your team, which is one of the hardest things leaders, managers, organizations ever try and undertake, this is one of the gaps that can help solve that problem. And we're going to show you that. Work from home or remote locations. Now, most of us today are working from home. I'd say or remote locations because, in the not too distant future, and some of us may be doing it already, you might have to be working from a hotel room or a conference room or an airport, like a hotel conference or an airport, and you might not be able to rely on, and again, if you were all in the room with me right now, I'd ask you to raise your hand. How many times have you been to a conference or to a hotel and the internet connection isn't very good? I know I would raise my hand to that. So OneDrive is one of the ways where you can still operate efficiently and quickly and have access to your information where you don't necessarily have to rely upon a good quality high-speed internet connection. Now, you do want to have an internet connection, but you don't have to rely on it, and you can also work offline if that need should arise. Sharing files. We're gonna post a link to this here later in the session. But sharing files, period, or sharing large files, I would challenge nearly anyone if your organization has moved into the Teams, Microsoft 365, SharePoint world, you should pretty much never email a document again. So sharing files, and again, especially large files, because email doesn't handle large files well, that is one of the functions that OneDrive can help solve as well, which is great. Capturing site photos or receipts via mobile. So this is one of the things I mentioned, is that you can use OneDrive. We've had many clients come to us, and I even use it just for receipts, and saving receipts, whether it be a reimbursement receipt or, I go to Home Depot and buy something, and I want to make sure I keep that receipt. Well, I use OneDrive Personal to save a copy of that receipt, so I don't have to try and remember and find that paper later at a later date. But we've had lots of clients say, hey, I'm out in the field, or I'm on a job site, or I'm out in the parking lot, where if I'm in the automotive business, or property management, any things where you might be remote, and I'm trying to take pictures and I want to share that with my team. This can actually remove several steps in the process by using OneDrive and Office Lens on your mobile. Again, I'm not going to demonstrate that today, but it's relatively easy to do with OneDrive when you navigate to the respective folders. One of the other things that I like about OneDrive is that you can, as I mentioned about working from home or remote locations, is you can manage and you can choose what folders and files are actually synced to your local device. This is important because the internet and cloud has infinitely more amount of storage capacity than your local machine does. And so understanding how to manage what data does actually sync to your machine or not, what information do you use on a frequent basis or not, can really help you work more efficiently and effectively. And then finally, this is one of the challenges in particular that OneDrive has, is that there are some syncing gotchas with bandwidth. There are some things that some of the capabilities of SharePoint libraries when you're saving documents in SharePoint that don't, when you sync the documents to folders or documents to OneDrive, some of the feature sets don't exist on the local machine. And so there's some challenges there that I want people to be aware of as they're thinking through how they might adopt SharePoint and then how it might play with OneDrive. It's just one of the challenges. It's not the end of the world, but it's something that we just like to be candid and upfront about. Okay. Those are the high-level items that we're going to cover today. But I want to give you some common use cases, because these do solve real business problems that we all have, especially if we're working remotely, if we're trying to transition to SharePoint, share large information, and manage what you use and personalize the experience of how you engage with the data in your organization. So, all right. With that said, without further ado, let's dig into the demonstration. All right, so I am going to grab we're going to start with office.com. So if you haven't been to OneDrive before, if you don't know how to access OneDrive, I'm going to start with the basics. So go to office.com, and if you'll notice right here, the little cloud icon, and if you hover over it, it's called OneDrive. So right over here on the side. I've already clicked on this. And so this is what OneDrive looks like when you're in the web browser, okay? As I mentioned, that's one of the ways in which you can access it. The handy reason why, okay, you might ask, why would I access via the browser? Well, if I'm not on my local machine, or maybe maybe my machine's being worked on, because that never happens, right? I mean, most of the time it doesn't, but when it does, maybe you're at a conference room machine and you want to try and access it from a conference room, or you're at a training room where you just don't have your device with you. Accessing this information via the browser provides you that information as well. So not only is it you'll have your files, but it also gives you access to the other SharePoint libraries that your team and your organization uses as well in your different SharePoint sites. So this is the browser. One of the things I wanted to show is that if you don't have OneDrive, you can get the OneDrive apps right here. I'm actually going to go ahead and click on that just to illustrate a point. Most of us today, because Windows 7 went into life more than a year ago, are on Windows 10 machines. So Windows 10 machines, a little disclaimer here, if you're a Windows 10, OneDrive is already installed. So you don't even have to worry about it if you're already on a Windows 10 machine. However, if you're on a different version of Windows, this is where you can download it. And if you want to download the mobile app to make it easy for yourself, you could just put in your mobile number. It'll send you a text message with a link, or you can just go to one of the app stores and download it. It's free. So those are just a couple of basics I wanted to make sure that we covered as we're digging into OneDrive. All right, so now what I'd like to do is I'm going to pull up the File Explorer, okay? And I'm actually going to go to, this is the, just go to my PC here, just what you'd expect to see, like with the C drive. This is your local C drive, your network shares if you're on your network. So this is what you're used to seeing. Well, with OneDrive, as I mentioned, there's 3 different flavors. So I wanted to show how along the side here, the way Microsoft has used their naming convention, again, thank you for making it confusing. However, if you just know a couple little tips, it's easy to tell the difference. There's OneDrive-personal. I don't have to tell you what that's for. OneDrive-MyTech. So this is when we talked about your My Documents or your user folder. Microsoft is basically putting everything towards your OneDrive-MyTech or your organization. Your organization name would be there. That is basically your kind of your My Documents or your user folder. So think about it that way. I have another organization that I use that's part of my that I use. So here's another one. Again, this is OneDrive-company name. And then you'll notice this one. It doesn't say OneDrive, it says MyTech, so it'll say your company name if you've synced anything from SharePoint. But this little building icon is what you can know that the third flavor, as I mentioned, is if you're syncing information from your SharePoint site. So if you're syncing information from your SharePoint site, you'll see the little building icon and then the company name. Through this process, I'm going to show you what it looks like to add that and how easy it is to do it. But these are the different flavors. You're going to see OneDrive-personal, OneDrive-company, and then the building icon is when you're syncing information from your corporate SharePoint site. All right, so those are the easy ways to see that. The other thing that I wanted to show, and I need to actually escape out of this momentarily, because I need to show full screen, show taskbar. So the other thing, if you follow my cursor all the way down here on the bottom, forgive me because I know this is small, but if you hover over these, you'll see multiple clouds typically down at the bottom. And every once in a while, this is one of the gotchas with OneDrive, is that if it ever stops authenticating, right? So if you're logging into your company, which is how you sync information from your company. So like as this one shows, as I hover over at MyTech, it's OneDrive-MyTech, thank you, it's not showing it that great, OneDrive-MyTech there. If there's a little X over that, all I do is click on here and it'll basically pop up, say, hey, it's up to date, or it'll ask me, hey, log in, or you need to authenticate, things like that. And I need to do that, I forget how PowerPoint does that. So, and then if you hover the other ones, this is OneDrive Personal, the gray one is OneDrive Personal, and this is just the other organization that I also have syncing. So this is also where you can see OneDrive. The other thing that I like to show here, because most people don't know, in fact, it took me a while to figure it out, how to unsync or stop syncing. So I'm gonna actually click on here. In fact, I'm just gonna go to Help and Settings, and I'm gonna go to Settings. So that's where I can unlink this PC. So again, I'll show you that again. Forgive me. Thank you, PowerPoint, for, even though I said, please show me the taskbar, it likes to click away from that. So when I click on unlink this PC, great, thank you. Basically, this is where you can choose to add or the different accounts. I can stop syncing, or I can unlink this PC, and then it'll basically just stop syncing that information. So this is where if you want to stop syncing a folder, like you've chosen to sync something and you want to stop it, this is where you can do it. So that's just a little tip that I wanted to show as well. Okay, so now we have some basics. We've been able to install OneDrive. We know the differences between the different OneDrives and like the My Documents versus SharePoint, et cetera. But how do you customize it? How do you personalize the experience for you and your team? So for that, I'm going to pull up one of our SharePoint sites. So if you're at office.com, you can just click on SharePoint. and I've just chosen to open up one of our SharePoint sites in the demo environment, which is our marketing team. And notice there is, I've got multiple document libraries. So I've got, this is just called documents. This is the standard document library. I've also added another document library. So I'm actually going to sync both of these, and I'm going to use it to illustrate a couple points. But I want to show you a couple things first. One, notice how in this document library, there are different columns. So there's the information here, modified date, modified by. Those are common things that you would expect to see in a file folder, for example. But when you look at status, product, location, some of these columns, this is some custom stuff that we have done to categorize and allow us to sort and filter information in SharePoint. That's the kind of information that I was talking about earlier that does not come over into OneDrive. So I want you to just look at it, not because we're going to dig into the details. We've done other sessions digging into that. However, I do want you to know that if this is something your organization is doing, which I do recommend, be aware that it doesn't sync to OneDrive, at least not yet. I don't know if that's on the roadmap or not for Microsoft, but it'd be great if it was. But as far as I know, it's not. At least not anytime soon. The other thing that I want to show you is that right now, when I click sync, there's going to be another icon that looks like this, but it's going to say Contoso on it. Notice that does not exist here right now. I think that's really important. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the screen so you can see. I'm going to snap the screen to either side. So so now you can see I do not have Contoso here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click sync right here, and I want you to kind of pay attention to how fast it actually syncs to my local machine. So I'm going to click sync. And this is, by the way, how you sync to OneDrive. And it's going to say it's trying to open to OneDrive. And say, yes, please do that, because I'm asking it to sync. So it's basically preparing and syncing OneDrive. Sign in. Please, I don't know if I remember my password for this tenant. There we go. Next, great. And I'm going to say use the same folder. Okay, good. So I don't need to get to know OneDrive. Now, Contoso, after a couple clicks, a couple seconds, now, as I mentioned, this Contoso folder has just shown up. So, and I'm going to open that up just for the sake. I'm going to go and close this out over here. And I'm going to open this up, and you'll notice that it looks like it synced everything that I had previously synced. So that's not what I was hoping to show. So in the documents, the marketing team documents, you'll see that right here. Marketing team documents, you'll see, if I click on this, you'll see all the same folders, event planning, general, inventory requests, all that stuff is here, and all these documents that are here are now here. That's something that was as an easy sync. It was a couple of clicks to be able to do that. And we're going to dig into the status column here in just a moment. So the other thing I want to show is I want to go that right now, in the marketing team, what I don't have synced, I've got marketing team documents, marketing team general, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to now maximize this. I'm going to go to this HR doc library because I want to actually, why is it not? It's taking a second. There we go. I actually want to sync this too. So I'm going to click on, so I'm in a different document library, and I need to click sync at the different levels because I could also come into this vendor A folder and I could sync here. So that's, I'm going to illustrate that how I can not, I don't have to sync all the way at the parent level or the top level. I can actually just say, I really don't need vendor B. I only work with vendor A in the HR library. So I'm just going to sync at this level. So I'm going to click sync here. Yep, very good. Click sync, thank you. Now it should show up in my folder. So now I've got marketing team vendor A folder here, and all I have is that vendor A. So instead of having both of those folders, I just have one of them. So that's an example of how you can sync different folders, and you can different types of folders at different levels. So that's the next thing about OneDrive to be aware of. All right, so now let's talk about this, how you can manage the syncing environment. So I want to make this a little bit bigger. So you see all my different information here. I'm gonna go to the marketing team documents, and let's say that I click into general, and I think Christmas party planning. Couldn't remember if I had. There's some recordings here. Sorry, I had a couple documents. I guess I'll go. I'll just use general as the example. I thought I had another subfolder, but I didn't. So at the general level, let's say I want everything in this folder, but not all these other folders to be kept on my machine. So one of the things that I like to use, be aware of, is the status column, because, and I'll show you what I mean by that, is that when it shows the cloud versus, for instance, this icon, this means that this is basically a shortcut. It's basically, it's the document and the information lives in the cloud. So that's what it's telling you. However, if I want to keep this information, like in that low bandwidth situation, when you're talking about working at a hotel or conference room, in a conference center, or just a low bandwidth environment, or from home, for example, and you want to not have to download a document every single time you open it, one of the things you can do is click on, I'm just going to click on General. I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to choose to say always keep on this device. So I'm going to go ahead and say always keep on this device, and you'll notice that this is now starting to sync, if you can see that. And then once it's done syncing, which will take a moment because there are some documents in there, once it's done syncing, it'll actually then change the icon. The other thing I like to show is that the way this icon comes in, notice the document. I'm just going to open up this document to illustrate the point. So I'm going to open the document up there. The document opens. This is just a test document, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. But notice once I open the document, it changed from a cloud to this kind of hollow circle with a checkbox, check mark. That means that the data is locally synced to your machine. However, it's only cached. Over time, if you don't access that document, Microsoft will just naturally release the data back to the cloud and remove it from your machine, and then the icon will turn back to a cloud. However, as I illustrated up here, and I wanted to kind of have a little segue, notice how these checkboxes are different. This one's a full filled in circle with a hollow check mark versus a hollow circle with a full check mark. This means that I have chosen to always keep this on, notice this checkbox, always keep on this device. So I'm telling Microsoft to always keep this information because that folder has information in it that I want to use and I want to keep it local to my machine for me to operate quickly and efficiently through OneDrive. All right, so key status is there, and if I want to change that, for instance, you just get a right click and then say free up space. Pretty intuitive. And then notice it's going to turn that back to the cloud nearly instantaneously as it's just releasing that information back to the cloud. And there we go. So now that we're also in OneDrive, one of the things that you can also do, and this is where Stephanie will post a link to the session that we did, Stop Emailing Documents. You can also share files via OneDrive. So if I just right click on this document, I can say, well, I thought I could say share. Yeah, share. Hit share, and it pulls up an opportunity for me to send a link. And I can say people with Contoso, specific people, etc. This here and what you can do with sharing files from OneDrive is specified by policy. So your organization can choose to have certain folder structures or sites have a policy where you can share things externally or not. There's also some advanced security settings, again, little public service announcement. There's also some advanced security settings where you can identify documents themselves with a certain level of specificity or, sensitivity. And if they reach or over a certain threshold, then they will not. It's called data loss prevention. They will not leave the organization. You can't attach them to an email. You can't link them. It won't work. No one outside of the organization will have access. So, but this is also where you can share. We're not going to go deep in this here because we did a whole nother session on that. But this is one of the ways in which you can share is just right click, click share. And this again, what options you have here is set by organizational policies. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you really quick, as I illustrated earlier, is that if you remember in the web page, the documents here, there are these documents, which is what I'm showing in OneDrive, but there's all this extra information. These are some metadata, if you will, but the SharePoint lists is what Microsoft calls it. But if you look at in OneDrive, that data over here doesn't exist over here. So if I'm using SharePoint, which I highly recommend to be able to sort and filter and categorize information like you can do here if it's applicable to your organization, that information does not come across in OneDrive. So again, that's one of the kind of gotchas as far as OneDrive goes that you might want to pay attention to. So, so at a high level, that's really it, is learning to understand how to sync. So really, at a summary, it's understanding when there's the building icon, and your company name. This is syncing from your SharePoint, your corporate SharePoint site or SharePoint sites. If it's got OneDrive-company, that's your, kind of your My Documents or your user drive, and your OneDrive Personal. And the OneDrive Personal is also by policy or by, you can restrict that from being on corporate machines too. We do have some clients that have asked us to say, hey, I appreciate the functionality of OneDrive, but I really don't want people having the personal OneDrive installed on their local machine because it's a corporate machine, and I just don't want that available. That's something that can be done, but you have to prescribe that and manage that to restrict that. And that is really it. The last thing is just really understanding the status columns, because this is really, really important. Because the one thing I wouldn't want you to do is go to a conference or a hotel, you have bad internet connection, and try and download some of this information on that. If you can think ahead a little bit, you can manage that and make that a much better experience for you. So with that said, let's wrap up. I would ask you, how can OneDrive improve your team experience and work from home? Because I think OneDrive, even when I'm in the office, if I know that there's documents that I use regularly, I will use OneDrive even though I'm in the office. Like I'm in the office right now, and I use OneDrive to access the content for this session because it's faster and easier for me than browsing and navigating to a web browser and downloading it. So I don't have to do that because I've set up OneDrive to be able to do that. So think about things like that that can not only improve your team's experience even when they're in the office, but how that might affect those that travel or that are working from home to give them better and easier access to their information. So I encourage everyone, if there are some takeaways or some nuggets or some information you learned from today or that you want to apply to your organization today, write them down now as far as actions that you want to take, whether it be you individually or you with your team. Even if you don't do them immediately, try and write those down immediately so that you can put them on your to-do list using Microsoft To Do maybe, and come back to them later. Finally, if you would like any help working through any of these scenarios, please raise a hand. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you and see if there's anything we can do to help plan a migration, execute a migration, or train your team to take advantage of these tools better. And finally, please join us for future virtual training and Power User events. Power Users events are at the end of, we have one at the end of April, one at the end of June, and we have events every other week through the end of June, already mapped out on our website, mytech.com/events. So I would like to thank everyone for attending today. OneDrive is a key and should be a key component of your Microsoft 365 organizational strategy. It will give your team a better experience. It will help drive adoption with your team, and you can allow people to share documents internally and externally easier. Look at that the session that we did on stop emailing documents, and we look forward to hearing from you if there's anything we can do to help. Okay, for those who attended and have to drop off now, thanks very much. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. For those that can stick around and open up for some questions, Stephanie, let's go ahead and do that and open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. We got quite a few questions here. Awesome. So start from the beginning. The first question is asking, in your view, is SharePoint mature enough to act as a cloud file host with Active Directory support, such as it could be replaced or it could replace an on-site file server?
Yes, with a little asterisk. So that is actually I'll illustrate what I mean by that. So it is some of the asterisks are as such. There are certain types of files, documents, like, so for instance, if you're using any type of database like a QuickBooks or a Quicken or any other application that has some, and you're saving, and that is using your file server today, that may or may not work in SharePoint, right? You might be able to sync, use that and save that to OneDrive, which can then sync, but it doesn't, like if you have multiple people using that database, it doesn't really work very well. So that wouldn't be able to replace the file server functionality there. And that might be something where you'd have to look at, can you do, I'll just use QuickBooks as an example. It's very commonly used, or Sage, use Sage or QuickBooks Online, right? If that's an option for you, then yes. The other thing that plays is, like, if you're using design or high graphics files, there are some nuances about the way those applications receive their license and access that information that SharePoint may or may not be the right fit for. And there are some third-party tools that help with that. Potentially, again, it all depends on the application, really. So I'm being vague. I'm not trying to be vague, but I'm being vague because it all depends on the application. The final thing is that there are some upper limitations of a few things. Like for instance, the total number of characters, if you look up here at the top bar, the total number of characters here in the URL can't exceed, I think it's like 400 characters. So as I click into a subfolder, and if I click into another subfolder, which I didn't do here, as notice how the characters all of a sudden got really long. So that is where there's some limitations there, and there's limitations of upwards of like over 100,000 files in a library. There's just some upper limits that if that applies to your organization, you'll just need to be either A, SharePoint's not going to do all. It might be some, but you might have to find a solution for other aspects of your world. Or there might be some third-party tools or plugins that you might need to be able to help overcome some of the native challenges of OneDrive and SharePoint together. So, but in general, I can say that with those are kind of the asterisks, but there's definitely a lot of organizations that if you're using a file server for typical documents like you see here, Word documents, PDFs, PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets, etc., SharePoint absolutely, in my opinion, is mature enough to be able to move your file server there and eliminate the need for a local file server. And I can't not say this, I get a double negative, so I have to say this, is that one of the key components, we did a whole nother session on this, so there's a session on file server to SharePoint planning that's on our website, and Stephanie, would you mind, let's add that to the list of links that we'll send out as far as to think through, because we go to this topic a little bit deeper. But in SharePoint, you have capabilities that don't exist in your file server. So we don't really recommend just copying and pasting whatever's in your file server to SharePoint. For one, because if you're like any other organization that we've ever worked with, including ourselves, we've got a lot of mess, right? So I don't want to copy the mess or bring over the mess. And secondly, there's different capabilities, right? So for instance, being able to, instead of all of these being subfolders, for example, all these criteria, these metadata being subfolders, I can use this data to help filter and sort and find information faster and without having to click in and out of different folders. So really being intentional about how SharePoint can replace your file server as well, and that's something that we help walk organizations through and help think through the planning process of a file server to SharePoint migration. So not a lot to demo there, but great question, and hopefully that was helpful.
Awesome. We got another one here asking if it's true that OneDrive segments an organization's storage into separate pools per computer or per Microsoft 365 user account. How can IT admin access or consolidate all the OneDrive user accounts so that files can be made accessible to multiple people?
Okay, so I think if I understand the question correctly, so for instance, if I've got my OneDrive here, for example, this is just for me. And for instance, one of the things, if you're a Microsoft Teams user, which a lot of you folks probably are, when you, in fact, I'll click on this to illustrate it. When you upload data into Teams, I've got a lot of stuff here, but it shows Microsoft Teams data, Microsoft Teams chat, like it syncs locally to your OneDrive automatically. I don't put them here; it just automatically. Whenever you upload something into Teams, in a chat, excuse me, it's in a chat. Not if you do it into a team. Again, thank you, Microsoft. Not into a Teams team, but if it's a Teams chat, it actually saves the data in your local OneDrive, and that data shows up in your Microsoft Teams data here. So anything in this folder, I don't know if it's, maybe it's in the chat data, chat files. Yeah, so any of these files that you see here are files that I have uploaded into Teams. So again, I went through that quickly because that's my tech data. And I didn't want to share that in detail, but I think your question is, if the data exists here, how can we consolidate it? And I don't have a great answer for you. The reason why the SharePoint syncing exists, as we illustrated here with Contoso, is that using your SharePoint sites is where you're going to want to consolidate that data. There is, as a global admin, or as the IT admins, you do have access to, if you needed to dig into a recover, restore, use for HR reasons, information that's in the OneDrive company name, you would have access to that. So it's not just for everyone else, good public service. This is not, it's company data. It's not your private data. If it's in your My Documents, that is still company data. So you do have access to it, but if you're trying to consolidate it, that's why the different SharePoint sites exist, is to use the SharePoint sites as document libraries and consolidated files? I think that's the question. In our file server to SharePoint migration session that we did a couple weeks ago, what is it, 3-4 weeks ago now, I can't remember, goes into that in a little bit more detail as far as how to kind of think through and plan some of that out, how the SharePoint maps to some of the things you might be doing in a file server.
Yeah, and I'll include that in the follow-up email, but I also posted a link in the Q&A to that session as well for anybody who's interested. So
and again, for the person who asked that question too, I think that was the nature of your question. If not, please clarify, and maybe we can get to that later before we're done here.
All right, and there are quite a few questions around this. I'll try and
summarize
them all, but it's around the syncing. So when you're syncing to your local machine from SharePoint, there's lots of questions about version history and whether if you have it downloaded to your machine, is it no longer syncing back to the cloud? So I don't know if you can kind of go in that because there's a lot of questions all circling that.
Yeah, and that great question. So so first of all, I like to use the illustration of, I don't know why it's not, I'm gonna hit refresh here. It wasn't giving me the menu bar at the top, I don't know why. First of all, I'll just hit on the word sync. It means that it's syncing the data back and forth. It's not just a one-way sync. It goes both directions. So if you've chosen to sync this information, again, as I've got illustrated here, the marketing team documents, if I click on that, this information, it's the same information that you see, right? Same information. So this is actually keeping it in sync back and forth. So like, for instance, I've downloaded this, and this is, I'm gonna right click on it, illustrate that again. I'm gonna say always keep on this device. So now this document, I'm telling it to always keep on this device, but really the parent document, if you will, if this is a child document, the parent document and the source is still SharePoint. So I think that's the crux of the issue, or of the point, is that SharePoint is the repository, it is the authoritative source. This is just allowing you to have it synced locally. And I'll go, I haven't had a lot of revisions on this, but you can go in here and click on the breadcrumbs. So if you hover over a document in SharePoint, because version history is one of the things, and you click on that, you go to version history, it'll tell you, there's probably not many because okay, there's more than I thought. So it'll tell you the version history of this document and the different iterations of it. And you could basically open it, restore it. If you click on this, again, you can view it, restore it, or delete it. So the thing you can do in version history as far as that goes. So if you have multiple people accessing this, because this is where it goes into, right? So multiple people are accessing this quote unquote document, because I called the document really creative here, Nate. And if you're opening the document from here, right, versus and thank you for taking a moment, Word to open, please, there we go. It's not opening. Okay. So if you open the document from here, it does open on your local machine. But if I go in here, I can do the same thing. In fact, I'm just going to close out of my Word because maybe my Word needs to just get closed there. So if I go in here and hit the breadcrumbs, I can also say open the document in browser as the default. So if I just click on it, it's the browser or the app. So this will open up in Word. Yep, please open up in Word. It's going to then do that. Sync up. Don't save. So there we go. Open in Word. This is it. So when I save this, notice autosave is on. So this is one of the key components to understand, is that anytime anything's in SharePoint, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's okay to have a low bandwidth internet connection, but it's better if you have at least an internet connection, right? Because the autosave feature will be on. So if I make changes to this, okay, so this is an example. So I'm gonna do this by illustration. So I'm making changes. I open the document here in SharePoint. It opened in the local, I chose to open up in my local Word app. So I'm going to make a change. I'm going to edit the document, and then I'm going to pull it up here in I'm going to pull up this version of it and see notice how it's syncing already. I haven't even made changes. It's already starting to sync. So I'm going to try and keep this. Here, I'm going to pin this to either side so you can kind of see the changes happening in your real time. Making changes for demonstration purposes. If I could spell. Okay. Oh, great. Thank you, demo. Missing properties. Missing invalid. Okay, well, that's interesting. That is great. That's not what I was hoping for. Thank you. Well, for demonstration purposes, that didn't really work. Bummer. I think what I need to do is I'm going to make sure this is required info. So I'm going to do this. This is why I made this a required property. So I'm going to edit this. I need to enter value. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, this is for demonstration purposes. I did that. So now this required property is here. I think I can do this now without it being a problem. Sorry about that. But that's one of the gotchas. Open. Give me for. I didn't plan that part of the demo. So over there, I'm going to say making. Simplify it there. Notice autosave. I didn't click save. Like I have my hands up, so I didn't click save. It's automatically saving. It's actually noted as saved. Now I'm going to make another change real quick, but notice what looks like up here. So pay attention up here if you haven't seen this before. Another change. Usually it says saving and then saved. Close it. Why is it doing that? That's really weird. It usually doesn't ask you to save it, so that's really odd. So now I'm going to open up here. I'm opening it up here locally. There, it's there. So if you recall, so I made an edit to I opened the document up here, made a change, and then I went here, and within like a couple seconds, I opened it up here, and it shows the same changes. So that's basically, it's constantly changing, constantly saving in the background is really the point. It's always syncing. So what if I don't have an internet connection? Or what if multiple people editing at the same time? Well, Microsoft, one of the things with SharePoint and Teams is that you can have multiple users editing a document at the same time. So like if Stephanie was in this document, it would give me an indicator that Stephanie was up here in the document, and I would actually be able to see where her cursor is. And so it does that in real time, and it knows how to save and manage that. If you happen to edit the same part of the document at the same time, or like maybe you're offline, maybe you're on a plane and you edited the document, or you're in a low bandwidth situation like a conference and you weren't online and you edited the document, and then once you come back online, it starts to sync those changes. Well, it will give you, it'll tell you if there's a conflict, but before it tells you there's a conflict, it will first intelligently try and see what did you change versus what did somebody else change, and if you didn't change the same information, it'll just blend and merge that information together. So it'll do that for you, just like as if you're real-time multi-user editing at the same time. So that's really how it works in the back end. It will give you the ability to manage a conflict if there is, similar to going to the version iterations and the version changes. But when you go here into version history, again, hover over, click the breadcrumbs, go to version history. This is where you'll be able to see anything that's modified. Notice just recently there's some multiple modification points here that you can, from which you can restore. So if somebody made a change that you didn't want, accidentally edited something you didn't want them to edit, then you can revert that. It's also one of the reasons why, as a little tip, if you're in, let's say that document, we're trying to say, hey, Stephanie, I put a draft out there. Would you mind making some comments on it? Use the comments feature. It's a subtle tip, but that way they're not editing. If you're asking people to give feedback on a document, tell them to use the comments feature so that they're not editing the document, and then other people can comment on the comments, so that then you can choose which changes you want to make versus trying to manage and revert changes that people made that you didn't want them to make. So being intentional about how you want to elicit that feedback or how you want that document to be edited is a part of the process that really helps. So I think I covered a lot of that, the blend of the questions, right? Syncing, how does it sync back and forth, low bandwidth, no bandwidth, multi-user, version history, etc. So hopefully that answered most of the questions.
Yeah, I think that covered, there was some in there about version control as well. I think the one, I just want to make sure that we're crystal clear on it, is that it's when you're downloading it to your device, or when you have the green checkbox, yes, where it's on your device.
Yep.
It's not, because there's a couple questions that are asking about when you have files that exist on both the C drive and OneDrive, and I want to make sure that we understand that it's not two files, it's one
Correct.
file. So I don't know if there's a little bit more context you can go around that.
Yes, actually, a great point. A good extra tip. So I'm gonna go over to my downloads folder. And so notice I don't have anything from today. I cleaned this up intentionally because I thought this might come, something like this might come up today. So downloads folder, nothing's really there from today. So I'm going to go into the SharePoint site. I'm going to choose this document, and no, I've just selected this document, and I'm going to click download. I think this is the scenario that you're talking about. So I'm going to click download. There it goes. It's downloading. It's ready. I'm going to say here, you can right click, say show in folder. I'm going to pull that up. So now it's going to show me in my downloads. I'm just going to highlight all this stuff. This document, right? So now I'm glad. So I'm going to pin this to either side. Nope, that's not the one. Excuse me. I wanted this one. So now I want to show you that I've got in marketing team documents, I've got this document, and in my downloads, I've got the same document. So if I download it like I did over here, that is not syncing. This is now on my local machine, and it is not syncing with anything that's in SharePoint. And we're here, this document is on my machine, but it is inside of OneDrive, so it is syncing back to the SharePoint site. So this indicator here, if it's in your OneDrive, so it's got to be in one of your OneDrives, and it's got to have this checkbox, or no, it doesn't have the checkbox. It just has to be in SharePoint. It could be any one of these indicators, and it will be syncing back to SharePoint. If you download it, in sync versus download, it is not syncing back to SharePoint, and you will have a multiple copy of it. So I imagine one of the other problems, I should have brought this up. I can't even believe this is one of the main problems that we hear from people. And so thank you so much for asking this question, is that organizational document templates. Is that how many of you, because especially if you're working from home and you didn't have the ability to like sync this stuff, what do people do? They save it to their desktop, or they save it in their downloads, and they basically have these copies of these templates in forms or whatever saved to the local machine, and then you as a maybe leader, manager, supervisor are updating the forms and the templates that you want them to use, but they're using the old ones that are still on their local machine. So one of the things that's it's part of our file server to SharePoint planning that we work through with folks is figuring out, well, what is in fact, I've got that in my my tech documents here. We actually have this continual service improvement -production documents. This folder right here, working to practice what we preach, is our MyTech's production like templates, forms, documents that we use throughout all of our processes, service, sales, finance, all the above. It lives there. And so I can then have these documents right on my machine instead of having to, and they always get updated, always, because I've got this folder synced to my machine. So no matter when I need one of those files, I always go to that folder, I always grab that information, and I always have the most current version because it's constantly syncing with the production version. So that is one of the things that I definitely recommend doing for your team, helping them with that. And even to the point of, if you've got folks in your organization that struggle with this stuff, or they struggle to make this change or adapt to these changes, well, go to their machine, look over their shoulder, and I kid you not, or take control of the mouse. I know we're not working together in person as much anymore, but just click this button for them. All you have to do, if this is a folder that they use on a regular basis, help them navigate to it, like walk them through it, share their screen, maybe share your screen with Teams, that's the way to do it, and show them and walk them through just clicking on sync. And then those documents, you only have to do that one time, and it will keep those things in sync. Unless they go and navigate and click unsync, which it's unlikely to do if they had trouble clicking sync in the first place, they're always going to have those documents available on their local machine in their file explorer, just like what I was showing here. So I think that answered the question. Yeah, if you download it, it's not syncing. If it's in OneDrive, it is syncing.
Awesome. Okay, so take this a level deeper.
Okay.
So someone particularly asked about the files on demand when unticked. Does that result in files existing on both a C drive and OneDrive, and then the syncing algorithm is smart enough to detect the changes on either end? And they're asking, what are the pros and cons to having sets of files on both the local drive and OneDrive?
So I don't know if I fully understand the question. I mean, and maybe you can, if I think I understand it correctly. I mean, the reality is these folders do exist. I mean, when I'm choosing the sync from SharePoint, these folders are are being saved and created on my C drive. They're on my local machine. So yes, they are on my C drive. But if I'm doing that via OneDrive, that's what's enabling the auto sync feature. That's what's enabling, or the auto save feature, excuse me. And that's what's enabling the documents to continually be updated. And knowing that the algorithm is doing that is basically making sure that it's a part of, not down here, my C drive, right? But it's part of a OneDrive, really, and we're talking OneDrive here. It'd be the building icon company name. So I think that's the nature, because again, these files, when I'm saving them, I'm saying, hey, save it, keep it on my local machine. Yes, these are saved to my C drive, but it's saving it inside of the OneDrive function of my C drive, which enables it to the algorithm to work in sync. So I think that's the nature of the question, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right, yeah, I'll send him a message just to make sure that got answered, because that was getting more complex. So.
Yeah, I think I think that might be a little complex, but I think that's what I understood the question to be, but maybe not.
Awesome. All right, so then there was, and you kind of touched on it, but I don't know if you want to show a little bit further, there's a lot of questions around the restoring a file and version history. So just asking that if somebody were to delete a file accidentally, how could you possibly go get that back?
Yes, so so there's a couple things there. You mentioned restoring a file, I think, from a version, because that's different than restoring a file from like the recycle bin. So so for instance, the recycle bin is over here, just like the recycle bin on your local machine. So I clicked on the recycle bin, there's nothing in here. But what I will do, just to illustrate the point, and this is a demo world, so it should work, but I've already had a couple things not work today. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this. Click on again, hover over it, click on the breadcrumbs. I'm gonna click delete. Yep. Done. Okay, and I'm gonna illustrate a point. I just clicked delete. Now I'm gonna pull it up in the marketing team documents. It's also gone here. So that was seconds. I mean, it's nearly instantaneous when that happens, presuming your machine's online. So okay, so I'm gonna go back. Now I'm gonna go to the recycle bin. And there's that document. So what I wanna do is hit restore. So I can select it, and then notice when I don't select anything, there's that option's not there. If I just hover over it, so if there's a lot of documents in here, I can choose which one I want. I just click here, and now I can click restore. Restoring item. It'll be in my documents. Oops, gotta go, yep, here. And if I click here, it's back there again. So it's that easy. That's the restore if somebody accidentally deletes it. I have had that happen. In fact, I did it to myself, and I didn't realize I deleted something, and I went back to a document. I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent a ton of time on a document, and it was gone. And so I was able to really quickly and easily go restore it myself, because I according to the audit trail, I accidentally deleted it. But okay, I guess so. I don't remember doing that, but that happened. So, but if I want to just restore a version, again, click on the breadcrumbs, hover over the document, click on the breadcrumbs, go down to version history. And you can, when I go in here, and forgive me, when I click view here, so this is the latest one, by the way, so I'm going to go back to one version back. So I click here, it's actually going to open the document. So I'm going to cancel there for a second. But if you hover over it, notice how there's a little drop box, little drop down that comes up. So I'm going to drop down here. If I click view, it's a little misleading, because you're not viewing the document, you're viewing the details of the document. And I'll show you by, here you go. It's like version history. This is almost useless to me, other than you can restore item version here, right? So if you want to view the document, again, forgive me, click on breadcrumbs, version history. I'm going to click on this one. I'm actually click on the link, and this will actually open up the document itself. So it's opening up this version of the document. So if I had, yeah, so here you go. It says to make this previous version become the latest version, click restore. So this, remember the other document that I had, and I'm gonna open up this one too, so you can see this is the current version, right? And this is the previous version. Okay, so if I want to revert back to this one, all I have to do is restore. So I'm going to close this, but you can compare them side by side to see what changed. So I'm going to delete that, or not delete it, close that one, and I'm just going to say, yep, I want to restore this one. Actually, I'm going to do it from a different spot, because I'm going to say here, I want to restore this one. You're about to replace the current version with a selected version. Yep, okay, great. Done. version history done. I'm going to close this. I'm going to open up the document here in the browser. Sales meeting agenda, now that's the previous version. I'm also going to open the document here in my OneDrive, just because you should see the version. So notice it happened very quickly. And this extra cursor is here, by the way, because it's seeing that I'm also in the document right here. Notice that's where my cursor is. When I click on the Word document, it knows that I'm there. And when I hover over it, it shows that I'm there. So I'm actually myself multi-user editing this document. But it was that easy to restore a previous version. Breadcrumbs, version history, you could open up the different versions to compare which ones you want to potentially restore them, and then it syncs automatically. And if you delete one, it goes to recycle bin, you restore, and again, it syncs within, nearly instantaneously, but within seconds. So I think that answered that question.
Yep, thank you.
I'm glad it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yay. There's been a couple questions just about security as well. Like one in particular was asking if the OneDrive and the syncing to OneDrive was HIPAA, if it met the HIPAA regulations, and there was another one that was asking if that was encrypted.
The encryption one, I'd have to double check on. I think the answer is yes. I know it's encrypted in transit. I think whether it's encrypted in storage, like on your local machine, depends on your local machine policy, I believe. Like if you've encrypted your local machine, yep, it's encrypted when it hits your local machine, and it is encrypted in transit. So good question though. I'm pretty sure that the encryption in storage depends on the local machine, but I'll have to double check that question. But it's definitely encrypted in storage, right? I mean, you can see that up here because HTTPS, and that it uses that to encrypt both ways and via OneDrive. The HIPAA part is that gets into a few different things. Again, is the local machine encrypted or not? The other thing that I like about it is that by policy, you can actually remove access to certain information. So like if something's lost or stolen, you can turn off access to this stuff quickly. The problem is that if somebody does get into a machine and that doesn't connect to the internet. So for instance, if it's not encrypted, they do get into the machine, and before it connects to the internet to see the new policy to like maybe wipe something or turn something off, the documents would exist if they've synced them to the local machine. If they actually have downloaded them, again, it's downloaded them. They'd have to actually have these checkboxes on them, or it would have to be, always keep on this device. It would have to be the green checkbox, fully check, because otherwise, if it's just a cloud icon and they've synced, well, until they connect to the internet, it won't connect. And if you've turned off access because you know that device was lost or stolen, or that person's device was lost or stolen, then it'll change. So, but the best bet there is local device protection of encryption, like was kind of alluded into in the question. But Microsoft does have their cloud meets or exceeds all of those regulatory compliance, depending on. In fact, they even have special clouds, like for if you're special clouds. Sounds funny. Like if you have Department of Defense or certain government entities, there's different layers of clouds that they're completely partitioned away from everybody else as well. But for most organizations, including things like HIPAA or FINRA, SEC, those kind of details and regulations, their cloud does meet those requirements. The other things that you might want to look at and you might consider, though, is this is where you might want to choose to turn off the ability to share documents outside of the organization. Right. So for instance, you can choose to say, hey, I know your OneDrive, you can't share that externally. So you can turn that off, at least via links. You can also make sure that certain documents with either if you've specified a level of sensitivity, this part is an enhanced license. The first part is just a policy. You can say, do I want to allow sharing externally or not? Yes or no. And by site, etc. The second one is more complicated. It's extra licensing, so it costs more to be able to do this. And B, you have to employ policy. So you have to either say, if this document is marked sensitive or confidential or whatever you define, it meets the data loss prevention policy, so it can't leave the organization. And or you can say, if a document looks like it has, let's say you've got PHI, like a social security number or a client number, or something that would be applicable to HIPAA and that would identify something that you don't want to leave the organization. It could also meet the data loss prevention policy, and even if someone tries to send it externally, it won't go. The system will know across the environment to not send it. So yes, all of this does meet those requirements. The specifics of that might be better understood by policy and understanding how your organization wants to employ it. So just know there's some nuances there.
Thanks, Nate. A couple more questions surrounding back to the beginning when you were talking about the different types of OneDrive, your corporate OneDrive, your personal OneDrive. So there's quite a few questions asking if they just have a company OneDrive, does that mean everybody can see everything in that OneDrive? If they permission and they share folders, you know, who has access to those folders? I don't know if maybe we could refresh like what those are and then who could see what in each of those folders, because there's quite a few questions around that.
Great. Yeah, great questions. So again, talking about company OneDrive. So if you see OneDrive dash your company name, that is, and the reason why I tried to characterize this earlier as your like your My Documents or your user folder, is that by default, that is permissioned for just you. Now, when I say that, it's still company data. So as a global admin, so if I'm the global admin of your organization, I can go and find that information that lives there, okay? Because it is company data. Well, by default, it's permission to only you have access. An admin will have access to that. But any other general person in your organization will not have access to it, unless you allow them to by sharing it. So for instance, if I come into, I can click on my personal something here. So let's say, notice how there's a little, these are some collaborations I've done. Notice there's this little, if you can see it, I know it's really small on your screen, so forgive me, but there's this little, in fact, how do I do that? Isn't there a way to like, plus icon, can I do that? It up. Sorry. I think there's a way I can do trying to zoom in. I always forget the zoom function, but anyway, there's a little person icon here, right? And now I know I'm using my personal OneDrive as an illustration here, but this the same applies to your corporate. I just know that I'd had some files shared. So if I've shared this, I've shared this externally, and you'll get a little indicator that there's a person that I've shared it externally. So that's how you can share that, and how you can know if it's been shared or not. And forgive me, Stephanie, I just lost track because you kind of see this here too, that these have been shared here. But now I recall, thank you, that this is just my documents. So this is basically my user drive, my documents, unless I have chosen to share this with somebody else, okay? Now these here are permissioned because these are SharePoint sites. I'm gonna pull up the SharePoint site. These are all permissioned with, and I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna go back to SharePoint. Like all of these sites are basically built into, and I'm going to click over here into Teams. So I'm going to open up Teams here. So web browser Teams. So we have our Teams. This is our demo environment. So as it's taking a second to log in, you're going to find out that these sites like marketing team, operations team, all of these, who has access to these sites and files is governed by who has access to these respective teams, and thus who has access here in Contoso. So if they don't have access to it in Teams and SharePoint, they wouldn't have access to it here. So the permissions apply whether it's in OneDrive, SharePoint, or Teams, and the OneDrive, the company OneDrive versus the company SharePoint, the SharePoint syncing. This is just for you. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you. There was one particular you showed how to unsync, and someone asked why. Can you give a use case on why you would ever want to unsync?
The use case could be, I know an example, and I don't have it in here because it's in my tech stuff, but when we had a team that we put together to collaborate on documents when we went on lockdown a year ago. We basically created a team, had a file repository, we were all working remotely. That's stuff I wanted synced at that time. But I haven't accessed that information in nearly a year now, so I don't need to have that synced anymore. So I could keep it synced, but if I don't need it, I can just unsync it. Maybe it could also be, so for instance, depending on how you use Teams, you can actually share, for instance, we do have it set up, and I wonder if I can show this. We actually have a demo in Teams that's like a board of directors team, or I think I have a guest team here somewhere. Yeah, guest access team. So maybe I'm invited as a guest to another organization, and they've allowed me to sync documents because maybe I'm collaborating with them on a project as an external vendor or something like that. And then that project's over. Okay, well, maybe I don't want to sync that anymore. So, there's not really a lot of harm in it, other than maybe you just don't want it on your machine. The biggest, the more significant part is really knowing the status, like keeping, if your C drive's filling up, your hard drive's filling up on your local machine, knowing that you can quickly and easily just right click and say free up space. So you might still keep the link there, so the syncing is still happening, but you might not want to have the documents, downloaded to your machine. So either one makes sense. There's definitely different use cases, but in general, if you're not using it, you just don't use it, and not a big deal. So yeah, good question.
All right, I think I got the last one here.
All right, thanks everybody, this is great.
Yeah, so they're asking if they created a shared library in OneDrive, if that creates a Microsoft 365 group.
No. So if you're in OneDrive here, so let's be clear, if you're in OneDrive here, again, meaning OneDrive - company name, that is going to create its own little permission group. So if I chose to say, right click and say share with, these two people, it's not creating a group. The Microsoft SharePoint, like the group construct in Microsoft 365, is really around teams and teams sites. So when we talked about, like, when you create a team here, you are creating a Microsoft, an organizational group as it applies to Microsoft 365. Even when you create, like if you ever use a private channel, notice how this has a little lock on it. If you create a private channel, that actually breaks the construct of a group, and it does the same thing as if you're sharing it individually with your OneDrive, is it creates a separate, unique, specific permissioning group based on that private channel, that's separate from the group that's created when you create the operations team. So yeah, the group construct, we do cover that deeper in our Power User Group sessions. So whoever's asking that, we have some Power User Group sessions where we actually talk very specifically about the group construct, the organizational group construct, because it is a core to the security and permissioning of Microsoft 365. But no, creating a share in OneDrive, again, if it's your OneDrive - company and you're just permissioning, like is kind of illustrated here, like I think I did this as an illustration. I permissioned this for someone else to see my reimbursement receipts for whatever reason, but it only permissions that person or persons to see that folder, and it's uniquely managing that. It's not an organizational group or a permissioning group per the 365 construct.
Yeah. All right, I think I got them all.
Wow, that was amazing. Who knew that? We did not know that. We knew we got this question a lot about OneDrive and SharePoint, but we had no idea that there was so much going on around it. So I'm glad we did it. And if there's I appreciate the questions, because it just shows that we can probably do more on this in the future. But stay tuned for the follow-up email, because we definitely have some content that we're going to share as far as resources that we've covered today beyond the session itself. And thank you so much for the engagement and the questions. And I hope this was helpful in your work from home strategy, or just helping create a better experience for your team by making it easier for them to access the information that they need to do their job and to serve your clients or your customers. So thanks, everyone. I guess we'll sign off and take care. Until next time.